Commander Vexlar sat in the corner of the military cantina, his three eyes fixed on the amber liquid in his glass. The other soldiers gave him space, as they always did. He was a legend among the Caltharian forces, a warrior who had survived 12 campaigns across 4 sectors. His scales bore the scars of 100 battles, and the medals on his chest told stories of valor that few could match. But tonight, the young recruits had gathered courage, and one of them approached his table. "Commander," the young soldier said, his voice shaking slightly. His name was Rin, fresh from the academy with scales that still gleamed bright green, unmarred by combat. "We heard you fought with the humans during the Zenith War. Is it true?" Vexlar looked up slowly, his center eye focusing on the recruit while his other two scanned the gathering crowd. More young soldiers had formed a semicircle around his table, their faces eager and curious. He took a long drink from his glass and set it down with a heavy thud. "I did not fight with the humans," Vexlar said, his voice like gravel. "I fought against them first, then beside them. Both experiences taught me things I wish I could forget." The recruits exchanged glances, moving closer. One of them, a female named Kira, with the typical Caltharian crest rising from her head, pulled up a chair. "Against them? But the humans are our allies now." "Now, yes," Vexlar said. He gestured for them to sit, and the group eagerly arranged themselves around his table. "But during the Zenith War, we made a terrible mistake. Command thought the humans would be easy to defeat. They looked at human physiology and saw weakness. They saw a species that stood on 2 legs instead of 4, that had soft skin instead of scales or chitin, that had only 2 eyes instead of 3 or 6. They saw prey." "What changed their minds?" Rin asked. Vexlar's mandibles clicked in what might have been a laugh or a grimace. "Reality changed their minds. I was there at the 3rd battle of Kepler Station. We outnumbered the human defenders 3-1. Our weapons were superior, our armor thicker, our battle tactics refined over centuries. The humans had been in space for less than 100 of their years. We expected it to be a slaughter." He paused, his claws tapping against the metal table. "We were right about the slaughter. We were wrong about who would be slaughtered." The cantina had grown quieter. Other soldiers, veteran and recruit alike, had stopped their conversations to listen. Vexlar noticed, but continued. "The first thing you must understand about humans is that they do not know when to quit. Every species in this galaxy has a breaking point, a moment when survival instinct overrides combat training and they retreat. Humans have this instinct too, but they can ignore it. They can look death in the face and charge forward anyway." Vexlar's voice dropped lower. "At Kepler Station, we breached their defenses within the first hour. We thought victory was certain. Then we learned what human soldiers are truly capable of." "What happened?" Kira asked, leaning forward. "We entered their medical bay, thinking it would be an easy target. We found 12 humans there. 8 were wounded, some severely. They could barely stand. Any rational species would have surrendered. Instead, they picked up weapons and fought us." Vexlar's scales rippled, a sign of deep emotion among his kind. One of them, a female soldier named Chen, had lost her left arm in the previous fighting. She had tied off the wound herself and continued fighting with one arm. When we burst into that medical bay, she was holding a rifle with her remaining hand braced against her body. She killed 4 of my squad before we brought her down. The recruits sat in stunned silence. Finally, Rin spoke. "That's impossible, the pain alone." "That is what I thought too," Vexlar interrupted, "but I would see it again and again. Humans have something they call adrenaline. It is a chemical their bodies produce in response to danger. It allows them to ignore pain, to push beyond their normal physical limits. I have seen humans with broken bones continue fighting. I have seen them run on legs that should not support weight. I have seen them hold defensive positions with wounds that would kill any of us within minutes." He took another drink, his eyes distant with memory. "There was a human in that medical bay, a male named Rodriguez. He had taken shrapnel to his abdomen. His insides were barely held together by field dressing. He should have been unconscious from shock. Instead, he dragged himself across the floor and detonated a grenade that killed 6 more of my soldiers. He killed himself in the process, but he did not hesitate. "Why would he do that?" asked a recruit from the back. "His life was already over." "That is what I could not understand at first," Vexlar said. "But later, when I fought alongside humans instead of against them, I learned. Humans form bonds with their fellow soldiers that go deeper than any tactical alliance. They call it brotherhood, sisterhood, family. They will die to protect each other, not because of military doctrine, but because of love. It makes them unpredictable and extremely dangerous." Kira shook her head in disbelief. "But Commander, surely their bodies have limits. Pain tolerance is one thing, but physical capability—" "Let me tell you about physical capability," Vexlar said, his voice taking on a harder edge. "After the disaster at Kepler Station, I was reassigned to a reconnaissance unit. We were ordered to track a small group of human soldiers who had escaped from a prison transport. There were 5 of them, and they had no supplies, no weapons, no communication equipment. They were on a hostile world with toxic atmosphere that required breathing apparatus. We had scanners, vehicles, full combat gear. Command said it would take us 6 hours to hunt them down." "How long did it take?" Rin asked. 18 days, Vexlar said flatly. The recruits gasped. Those 5 humans survived on that world for 18 days with nothing but the clothes on their backs. They raided our supply depots at night. They built weapons from scrap metal. They constructed shelter from wreckage. One of them had training in something called survival skills, and he taught the others. They moved constantly, never sleeping more than 2 hours at a time. They covered ground that should have been impossible. He leaned forward, his voice intense. "Do you know what a human body can endure? They can survive without food for 30 to 40 of their days. They can go without water for 3 to 4 days, longer if they have training. They can survive in temperatures that would kill us within hours. Their bodies adapt. I tracked those humans across ice fields, through toxic swamps, over mountain ranges. They just kept moving." "But you caught them eventually," Kira said. "We did not catch them," Vexlar corrected. "They ambushed us. After 18 days of running, they turned and attacked. They had prepared a killing ground with traps made from our own equipment that they had stolen. They had studied our patrol patterns and found our weaknesses. With improvised weapons and no armor, those 5 humans killed 17 of my soldiers before we could retreat." The cantina was completely silent now. Even the bartender had stopped cleaning glasses to listen. "That was when I first encountered Captain Hayes," Vexlar continued. "He was the leader of those 5 humans. When we finally negotiated their surrender, and yes, we had to negotiate because we could not afford to lose more soldiers hunting them, I met him face to face. He was thin from hunger, his skin burned from toxic exposure, his hands bloody and raw, but his eyes were clear and sharp. He looked at me and smiled. Then he said something I will never forget. He said, 'Good hunt. Want to go again?'" Rin's scales had paled to a sickly gray. "He was joking?" "No," Vexlar said. "That is the terrifying part. He meant it. Humans have a quality they call stubbornness or determination. They enjoy challenges. They thrive on adversity. The harder you push them, the harder they push back. It is built into their culture, their psychology, their very nature. They have a saying, 'What does not kill me makes me stronger.' They believe it. They live it." One of the other recruits, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "But Commander, if they were so dangerous, how did we become allies? Why are they not conquering the galaxy?" Vexlar's mandibles spread in what his kind used for a smile. "That is perhaps the most terrifying thing about humans. They choose not to. They have the capability, the drive, the ruthlessness when needed, but they also have something called empathy. They can imagine themselves in another's position. They can feel compassion even for their enemies. After the war, when the real threat emerged from the dark sectors, the humans were the first to offer alliance, not because they needed us, but because they believed it was right. He stood slowly, his height commanding attention from everyone in the cantina. I have fought beside humans for 6 years now. I have seen things that defy explanation. I have watched human medics run into active fire zones to rescue wounded soldiers from any species, not just their own. I have seen human engineers work for 70 hours straight to repair critical systems, refusing to sleep until the job was done. I have seen human pilots fly missions that were calculated to be suicide runs, and somehow survive through skill and sheer bloody-minded refusal to die. Vexlar picked up his glass and drained the last of his drink. You asked me to tell you about humans. Here is what you need to know. They are not the strongest species. They are not the fastest or the smartest. Their technology is not the most advanced. But they are the most dangerous beings in this galaxy because they do not accept limitations. When you tell a human something is impossible, they take it as a challenge. When you break their bodies, they repair themselves and come back harder. When you break their spirits, they find strength in each other and rise again. The commander looked around the room, his 3 eyes glittering in the dim light. And now they are our allies. I thank the stars for that every day, because I never want to fight against humans again. The casualties we suffered in the Zenith War still haunt our military planning. We learned an expensive lesson. Never underestimate humanity. Never assume they are beaten. And never, ever back them into a corner, because that is when they are most dangerous. Rin found his voice again, though it was shaky. Commander, you said you have more stories. Will you tell us? Vexlar looked at the young soldier for a long moment, then settled back into his chair. The bartender brought another round of drinks, setting them on the table without being asked. The crowd around Vexlar had grown larger, with soldiers standing 3 deep around the table, all waiting for his next words. Very well, Vexlar said, but understand this. Some of these stories will trouble your sleep. Some will make you question what you know about warfare, about survival, about the nature of sentient beings. The humans have shown me the best and worst that any species can achieve. Are you certain you want to hear this? The recruits nodded eagerly, and even the veteran soldiers leaned in closer. Vexlar took a drink from his fresh glass and began again. After the Zenith War ended and the alliance was formed, I was assigned to a joint military unit, half Caltharian, half human. We were to be the prototype for combined operations. I was skeptical, as were most of my soldiers. The humans who joined our unit seemed pleasant enough, but we wondered if they could be trusted, if they could work alongside those they had recently fought against. He paused, his claws drumming the table. The first mission we ran together taught me more about human psychology than I wanted to know. What was the mission? Kira asked. A rescue operation, Vexlar replied. A colony ship had been attacked by raiders in the Outer Rim. There were survivors trapped in the wreckage, but the raiders were still in the area. Command sent our unit because we were the closest, but they gave us a strict order. Do not engage the raiders. Our mission was purely extraction. Get in, get the survivors, get out. Avoid contact with the enemy. He took another drink, his eyes distant. The human contingent was led by Lieutenant Jackson. She was a small female by human standards, barely reaching my shoulder plates. She had red hair, which I learned is uncommon among humans, and eyes that seemed to see everything. When we received our briefing, she listened carefully and asked tactical questions. Professional, competent, but I could see something in her eyes when they mentioned the colony ship had children aboard. The recruits leaned even closer. Vexlar continued. We reached the wreckage 6 hours later. The raiders had moved off, but they had left mines and traps throughout the debris field. We moved carefully, sweeping for survivors. Our scanners detected life signs deep in the wreckage. in a section that was structurally unstable. Command advised us to wait for specialized equipment. Lieutenant Jackson looked at the readings, then at me, and said 5 words. "Those are children down there." "Did you go in?" Rin asked. I told her we had orders to wait. She nodded, then turned to her human soldiers and said, "I am going in. That is not an order. Anyone who follows me is volunteering and understands the risks." All 15 human soldiers stepped forward immediately. Not one hesitated. Vexlar's scales rippled again. I should have stopped them. I was the commanding officer. But I saw the determination in their faces, and I knew that stopping them would require force. So instead, I ordered my Caltharian soldiers to maintain the perimeter and went in with the humans. He was quiet for a moment, remembering. The wreckage was a death trap. Metal groaned and shifted with every step. We could hear the children crying somewhere below us. Lieutenant Jackson took point, testing every surface before advancing. Twice the floor collapsed beneath her, and only her quick reflexes saved her from falling into the void. A human soldier named Thompson actually did fall through, dropping 12 meters before catching himself on a support beam. He hung there with one hand, his other arm broken from the impact. You know what he said? He said, "Keep going, I'm fine here." He stayed hanging from that beam with a broken arm for 20 minutes until we could get back to him. Kira's crest had flattened against her skull in distress. "How did you reach the children?" We found them in what had been a recreation room. 17 children from 4 different species, huddled together in the darkness. They were terrified, some injured. The room was surrounded by unstable structure. One wrong move and the entire section would collapse. Lieutenant Jackson assessed the situation and came up with a plan that was absolutely insane. Vexlar's voice held a note of admiration. She would stay behind to brace a critical support beam while the rest of us evacuated the children. She would hold it in place with her own body until everyone was clear, then attempt to escape herself. "That is suicide," said a veteran soldier from the crowd. "That is what I told her," Vexlar agreed. She looked at me and said, "Maybe, but it is the only way to get all the children out. I can hold that beam. I'm strong enough." I argued with her. I said we could find another way. She refused to discuss it further and took her position. Then she ordered her soldiers to help me evacuate the children. They obeyed, but I could see the pain in their faces. The cantina was so quiet that the hum of the ventilation system seemed loud. Vexlar continued. We moved the children out one by one. It took 18 minutes. Every second I could hear Lieutenant Jackson straining, grunting with effort as she held that beam. The structure was settling, putting more weight on her. I heard her bones creak under the pressure. When we got the last child out, I went back for her. She was bleeding from her nose and ears from the strain. Her legs were shaking. She looked at me and said, "Get them clear first. Make sure they are all safe. Then come back." "Did you listen to her?" Rin asked. I had no choice. She would not move until I confirmed the children were safe. So I ran, got them to the extraction point, confirmed their safety, and ran back. It took 6 minutes. 6 minutes that felt like 6 hours. When I reached her position, the beam was seconds from collapse. I grabbed her and pulled with all my strength. We tumbled backward as the entire section came down behind us. The noise was deafening. When the dust cleared, Lieutenant Jackson lay on the ground, her body broken in multiple places. She looked up at me and asked, "The children?" I told her they were all safe. She smiled and said, "Good," then passed out. Vexlar's voice had gone soft. She spent 2 months in medical recovery. The doctors said she had cracked 3 vertebrae in her spine, shattered both legs, and caused massive internal bruising. She had held that beam with strength that should have been physically impossible for a human of her size. When I visited her in the medical bay and asked how she did it, she said something I have never forgotten. She said, "When children are in danger, you find the strength. You just do. It is not about physical capability. It is about will." The commander looked around at the young faces watching him. That is another truth about humans. They protect the young of any species as fiercely as they protect their own. They have an instinct for it that goes beyond rational thought. I have seen human soldiers throw themselves on grenades to protect alien children they had never met before. I have seen them charge into burning buildings, swim through acid lakes, cross minefields, all to save the young. They say it is because children represent the future, and humans are obsessed with the future. Is Lieutenant Jackson still serving? Kira asked quietly. She is, Vexlar said, and there was warmth in his voice. She recovered fully and returned to duty. She commands her own ship now. I served under her for 3 years after that incident, and I learned more about leadership from her than from all my Caltharian instructors combined. He paused. But I have more stories to tell you if you want to understand humans. That was just one example of their protective instincts. Their combat capabilities are even more impressive and terrifying. A new recruit who had just entered the cantina pushed forward. Commander, is it true that humans can fight for days without sleep? Vexlar nodded slowly. I have seen it with my own eyes. Let me tell you about the siege of Gamma Base. His voice took on a harder edge again, and the soldiers settled in for another tale. We were defending a strategic installation against a massive assault by the Kreth Collective. We had 300 soldiers, 200 Caltharians, 100 humans. The Kreth had 3,000 warriors and were determined to take the base. Command told us to hold for 48 hours until reinforcements could arrive. He took another long drink. The assault began at dawn. Wave after wave of Kreth warriors threw themselves at our defenses. We fought them off, but casualties mounted on both sides. After 12 hours, we had lost 50 soldiers. After 24 hours, we had lost 90. My soldiers were exhausted. We rotated them off the line for rest, 4 hours on, 4 hours off. But the humans refused to rotate. They fought for the entire 48 hours? Rin asked in disbelief. Longer, Vexlar said. Let me explain. The human soldiers organized themselves differently. They did rotate, but in shorter cycles. 30 minutes of intense combat, 10 minutes of rest. During those 10 minutes, they would drink water, eat high-energy rations, check their weapons, and prepare for the next rotation. They called it combat cycling, and it allowed them to maintain peak performance for extended periods. But some of them did not even do that. He gestured with his claws, painting the scene. There was a human sniper named Lu who took position in the highest tower of the base. From that vantage point, he could cover 3 approaches to our defenses. He stayed in that tower for 68 straight hours. 68 hours without sleep, with minimal food and water, in a cramped position that would have left any of us unable to walk. He eliminated 214 Kreth warriors during that time. 214 confirmed kills. The numbers seemed to stun the listeners. Vexlar continued, I climbed to his position on the second day to check on him. His eyes were bloodshot from fatigue and staring through his scope. His hands trembled slightly when he lowered his weapon. But when I suggested he take a rest, he refused. He said, every minute I am not shooting is a minute the enemy can advance. I will rest when they are defeated or when I am dead. Those were his exact words. How was that possible? Asked the recruit who had asked the original question. Our biology requires sleep. We cannot function after 30 hours without rest. Our reflexes slow, our judgment fails. Human biology requires sleep too, Vexlar said, but they can push beyond it through sheer willpower and chemical stimulation. The humans use something called caffeine, a stimulant drug that is legal in their culture and considered mild by their standards. They consume it in drinks called coffee and tea. During long operations, they also use stronger stimulants provided by their medical officers. But more than chemistry, they have mental discipline that allows them to function when they should be unconscious. He leaned back in his chair. There is a term humans use, staying in the fight. It means maintaining combat effectiveness regardless of physical condition. They train for it constantly. They put themselves through exercises where they are deprived of sleep, food, and water, then forced to complete complex tasks. They call it building resilience. I call it learning to ignore what the body is telling the mind. Kira spoke up again. But Commander, surely there were consequences. Exhaustion has a price. Oh, there were consequences, Vexlar agreed. After the siege ended and reinforcements arrived, I watched 20 human soldiers collapse where they stood, simply shut down like machines that had run out of power. They slept for 18 hours straight, some of them longer. The medical officers had to monitor them to make sure they did not slip into comas. When they woke, they were disoriented. Their muscles were cramped. Some had stress injuries from the prolonged fighting, but they had held the line. They had won. The commander's voice grew quieter. Liu, the sniper, was the last to leave his position. When the order came to stand down, he actually had to be carried out of his tower because his legs would not support him anymore. He had been in the same position for so long that his muscles had locked up, but he had kept shooting until the very end. The Kreth never took the approach he was covering. They could not because he eliminated every warrior who tried. Did he recover? Rin asked. Eventually, Vexlar said, but he lost feeling in 3 fingers of his right hand permanently due to nerve damage from maintaining his shooting position for so long. The doctors said he would never achieve the same level of precision again. They recommended he be reassigned to a non-combat role. He paused. Liu retrained himself to shoot left-handed. Within 6 months, he was back on active duty and just as effective as before. That is the human way. They adapt. They overcome. They refuse to accept limitation. Another veteran soldier, one with scars across his scales, pushed forward. Commander Vexlar, I served in the Battle of Proxima Outpost. There were humans there too. I saw something I still do not understand. Perhaps you can explain it. Vexlar nodded for him to continue. We were retreating from an overwhelming enemy force, the veteran said. We had taken heavy casualties and were in full withdrawal. There was a human soldier, wounded badly, who could not keep pace with our retreat. His squad had been killed, and he was alone. The logical thing would have been for him to surrender or hide. Instead, he took position in a ruined building and began firing on the enemy. He drew their attention deliberately, allowing the rest of us to escape. He must have known it was suicide. What was his name? Vexlar asked quietly. I never learned it, the veteran admitted, but I remember his face. Young, very young. He could not have been more than 20 of their years. When I last saw him, he was smiling as he reloaded his weapon. Smiling. Why would he smile? Vexlar was quiet for a long moment before answering. Because he had purpose. Because he was saving lives. Because in that moment, he mattered. The commander's voice was heavy with emotion. Humans fear death, as all beings do, but they fear meaningless death more. They fear dying for nothing. Give them a reason, a purpose, something worth dying for, and they will face death with courage that borders on madness. That young soldier knew his death would save dozens of others. In human culture, that is considered an honorable death, a good death. It gives meaning to the end. The veteran soldier bowed his head. I have carried guilt for leaving him behind. We all did. We were following orders to retreat, but it felt like abandonment. He did not see it as abandonment, Vexlar said firmly. He saw it as completion of mission. He saw it as protecting his brothers and sisters in arms. If you could ask him, he would tell you that he made his choice freely and would make it again. That is the human way. He looked around at the gathered soldiers. Do you begin to understand? Do you see why I say they are the most dangerous species in the galaxy? Not because of their weapons or their ships or their technology, because of their minds, because of their hearts, because of their absolute, unshakable conviction that some things are worth more than survival. The bartender had quietly set more drinks on the table. Vexlar noticed that his glass was never empty tonight. He appreciated the gesture. These stories were not easy to tell. Kira's voice broke the silence. "Commander, you said you would tell us about the best and worst of humanity. So far you have told us about their courage and their sacrifice. What is the worst?" Vexlar's scales darkened, a sign of deep distress among his kind. The worst of humanity is the same as the best. Their passion, their intensity, their refusal to accept limitation. These qualities make them noble, but they also make them dangerous. I have seen humans do terrible things in the name of protection, in the name of justice, in the name of revenge. They are capable of great cruelty when they believe it is warranted. He took a long drink before continuing. "During the war, I witnessed the destruction of a Kreth breeding colony. It was a military target, yes, but there were civilian populations there as well. The human fleet had orders to disable the military installations. Instead, they destroyed everything. When I asked the human admiral why he had exceeded his orders, he said the Kreth had destroyed a human colony the week before, killing thousands of civilians, including many children. He said it was retaliation. He said it was justice." The cantina had grown cold with tension. Vexlar continued, his voice hard. "I argued with him. I said that killing civilians in response to the killing of civilians was not justice. It was revenge. It was descending to the level of our enemy. Do you know what he said to me? He said, 'You are right, it is revenge, and I want them to know that if they target our children, we will make them pay a price they cannot afford. Not because it is right, but because it will make them think twice before doing it again.'" "Did it work?" asked Rin quietly. "Yes," Vexlar said bitterly. "The Kreth never targeted a human civilian population again. They had learned that humans protect their own with absolute ferocity. But the cost was thousands of Kreth civilians who had nothing to do with military decisions. I lost respect for that admiral, even though I understood his reasoning. It showed me that humans are capable of terrible calculations, of weighing lives like numbers on a balance sheet." Kira looked troubled. "But you still fight alongside them. You still call them allies." "Because they learned from that mistake," Vexlar said. "After the war, there was a reckoning within human military command. That admiral was court-martialed and removed from service. The human government issued formal apologies and paid reparations to Kreth survivors. They examined their doctrine and put stricter controls in place to prevent such actions in the future. They are capable of terrible things, yes, but they are also capable of recognizing their mistakes and changing. How many species can say the same?" He looked around at the assembled soldiers. "This is what you must understand about humans. They are not perfect. They are not saints. They are beings of passion and contradiction. They can be gentle and brutal, compassionate and cruel, selfless and selfish. They contain multitudes, as they say, but they try. They constantly strive to be better than they were. They believe in redemption, in second chances, in the possibility of change. That belief drives everything they do." An older Caltharian officer, one who had been listening from the back of the crowd, spoke up. "Commander, you speak of humans with great respect but also with caution. If we are to fight alongside them, what should we know? What should we expect?" Vexlar considered the question carefully. "Expect them to surprise you. Expect them to accomplish what you thought impossible. Expect them to form bonds with you faster and deeper than any other species. But also expect them to challenge you, to question orders if they believe those orders are wrong, to push boundaries and test limits. Humans do not follow blindly. They need to understand the why behind the what. Give them reasons, and they will follow you into hell itself. Give them only orders, and they will become difficult." He stood again, his full height impressive in the dim cantina light. "I have fought beside humans for 6 years now. I have seen them at their best and their worst. I have laughed with them, mourned with them, celebrated with them. They have made me a better soldier and a better being. But they have also shown me that I am not as brave as I thought I was, not as strong, not as committed. They have raised the standard for what it means to be a warrior. The commander pulled out a small device from his pocket and activated it. A holographic image appeared above the table, showing a group of soldiers, human and Caltharian mixed together, arms around each other, smiling at the camera. This is my unit, my family. Half of these beings are human. We have fought in 12 engagements together. We have saved each other's lives more times than I can count. These humans know my hatchlings' names. They attended my bonding ceremony. They are not just allies. They are brothers and sisters. Vexlar deactivated the hologram and looked at the young recruits. If you are fortunate enough to serve alongside humans, remember what I have told you tonight. Respect their capabilities. Learn from their determination. But most importantly, earn their trust. Once you have a human's loyalty, you have it for life. They do not abandon their friends. They do not forget their debts. They will stand beside you when others run. Rin stood, his scales shifting in color. Commander, thank you for sharing these stories. I feel I understand humans better now, though I admit I am somewhat frightened of them too. Fear is not wrong, Vexlar said, but let it be respectful fear, the kind that acknowledges capability without becoming paralyzed. Humans respond well to respect. They do not respond well to condescension or dismissal. Treat them as equals, and they will prove themselves to be more than equals. Treat them as inferiors, and they will make you regret it. The gathering began to disperse slowly, soldiers returning to their own conversations and drinks. But a core group remained around Vexlar's table. Kira still sat across from him, her expression thoughtful. Commander, she said quietly, you mentioned that humans form bonds quickly. How did you earn their trust? After fighting against them in the war, how did you convince them you could be trusted? Vexlar's mandibles spread in a sad smile. I did not convince them with words. I convinced them with actions. In our first joint mission, a human soldier was injured and trapped under debris. I had the strength to lift the debris, but it would have left me vulnerable to enemy fire. It was tactically unsound to take that risk for one soldier. But I had been watching the humans, learning from them. I understood that they valued individual lives over tactical advantage. So I lifted the debris and freed the soldier, taking fire in the process. I was wounded, but not severely. He touched a scar on his left shoulder plate. This is from that day. The human I saved was named Williams. After the mission, he came to me and said, "You did not have to do that. You could have left me." I told him that I could not because I was learning to think like a human. He laughed and said, "Then you are learning from the best." From that moment, I was accepted. The humans understood that I was willing to risk myself for them. That was the only proof they needed. Is William still serving? Kira asked. He is, Vexlar said with warmth in his voice. He is my second in command now. We have fought in 30 engagements together. He has saved my life 4 times. I have saved his 3 times. We keep count, and he likes to remind me that he is ahead by 1. Another soldier, a young male who had been listening quietly, spoke up. Commander, the humans must have weaknesses. They cannot be invincible. What are their limitations? Vexlar nodded slowly. They have many limitations. Physically, they are weaker than many species. A Caltharian warrior has greater strength. A Threx soldier has better natural armor. A Ven has superior sensory capabilities. Humans know this, and it drives them to be better. They train harder, fight smarter, and use technology to overcome their physical limitations. He paused, considering. But their greatest weakness is also one of their strengths, their emotions. Humans feel things deeply, and those feelings can cloud their judgment. I have seen human soldiers make poor tactical decisions because they were angry or afraid or grieving. They can be goaded into reckless action through insults or challenges to their pride. An enemy who understands this can manipulate them. Then how do they overcome this weakness? The young soldier asked. Through discipline and through each other, Vexlar replied. Humans train extensively in emotional control. They learn to recognize when their feelings are affecting their judgment, and they rely on their comrades to provide perspective, to talk them down from poor decisions. They check each other, balance each other. A human unit is stronger than the sum of its individuals because they compensate for each other's weaknesses. The commander looked at the faces around him, seeing understanding beginning to dawn. This is why human military doctrine emphasizes small unit cohesion so heavily. They fight in teams, in squads, in units that train together and deploy together. They build relationships that allow for honest communication. A human soldier will accept criticism from a trusted comrade that they would reject from a superior officer. They police themselves. Kira tilted her head thoughtfully. It sounds like humans have thought deeply about warfare and about their own nature. They have been fighting wars for their entire history, Vexlar said. They have refined the art of combat over thousands of years. When they finally reached the stars, they brought all that accumulated knowledge with them. Other species had to learn how to fight in space. Humans simply adapted their existing doctrine to a new environment. They were fighting effectively in zero gravity within 5 years of leaving their planet. It took us Caltharians 30 years to develop comparable capabilities. An older veteran pushed forward. Commander, I have heard rumors of human special forces, elite soldiers with capabilities far beyond normal troops. Are these rumors true? Vexlar's scales rippled in what might have been dark amusement. The rumors do not do them justice. Human special forces are the most dangerous individual soldiers in the galaxy. They go through selection processes that eliminate 90% of candidates. Those who survive are trained in combat, survival, infiltration, assassination, and psychological operations. They can operate independently behind enemy lines for months at a time. They speak multiple languages, understand alien cultures, and can blend into populations not their own. He leaned forward, his voice dropping. I worked with human special forces during a classified operation. I cannot tell you the details, but I can tell you this. I watched a 4-person human team infiltrate a heavily defended enemy installation, eliminate a high-value target, extract critical intelligence, and escape without raising an alarm. They were in and out in 45 minutes. It would have taken a conventional force of 50 soldiers to accomplish the same objective, and it would have been loud and bloody. How is such a thing possible? Rin asked. Training, selection, and mindset, Vexlar replied. Human special forces operators are chosen not just for physical capability, but for mental resilience and creativity. They can think unconventionally, finding solutions that others would never consider. They are comfortable with uncertainty and chaos. They thrive in situations that would break normal soldiers. He paused, remembering. The team leader was a female named Taylor. She was small, even by human standards, but she moved like a predator. Silent, precise, deadly. She could kill with her bare hands in seconds, but she preferred not to kill if it could be avoided. She said that killing was easy. The real skill was accomplishing objectives without casualties. That kind of thinking is what makes human special forces so effective. They understand that every death has consequences, even enemy deaths. They choose their actions carefully. Are they loyal to the Alliance? Asked a suspicious voice from the back. Absolutely, Vexlar said firmly. Human special forces operators understand the bigger picture. They know that the Alliance keeps their people safe. They may question orders. They may push back against missions they consider unwise. But when the decision is made, they execute flawlessly. I would trust them with my life. I have trusted them with my life. The cantina had grown late. Many of the soldiers had drifted away, but a dedicated core still remained. Vexlar could see that they were hungry for more information, more stories. He understood. When he was young, he too had been fascinated by alien species, by the differences and similarities between beings from different worlds. "Let me tell you one more story tonight," Vexlar said. "Then I must rest. Even old warriors need sleep." A few chuckles rippled through the remaining crowd. "This story is about hope, about the human quality I find most remarkable of all." He settled back into his chair. It was near the end of the Zenith War. We had been fighting for 3 years, and both sides were exhausted. The Kreth Collective had been pushed back, but they were not defeated. They held a dozen star systems and showed no signs of surrendering. The war had become a grinding stalemate, a meat grinder consuming soldiers from all species. Morale was low. Casualties were mounting. Many of us believed the war would never end, that we would fight until civilizations collapsed. "What changed?" Kira asked softly. "Humans changed it," Vexlar said. "There was a human diplomat named Patterson. She was not a soldier. She had never fired a weapon in anger. But she believed that the Kreth could be reasoned with, that they had legitimate grievances that needed to be addressed. Military command dismissed her theories. The Kreth had proven themselves to be brutal and uncompromising. Why would they negotiate?" He took another drink. Patterson went anyway. She took a small diplomatic ship into Kreth space, alone except for her pilot. She broadcast on all frequencies, asking for a meeting with Kreth leadership. For 2 weeks, there was no response. Then a Kreth warship intercepted her vessel. We all assumed she was dead. 3 days later, she returned with a Kreth delegation. The soldiers gasped. Vexlar continued. She had spent those 3 days aboard a Kreth ship, unarmed and unprotected, talking with their commanders. She learned their language. She listened to their grievances. She found common ground. When she returned, she brought with her the framework for a peace treaty. It took another 6 months of negotiation, but the war ended. Billions of lives were saved because one human refused to accept that war was inevitable. "That is incredible," Rin said. "How did she survive? The Kreth are predators. They could have killed her at any moment." "She survived because she showed courage," Vexlar said. "The Kreth respect bravery above all else. By coming to them alone, by facing them without weapons or fear, she earned their respect. They listened to her because she had the strength to speak. That is another truth about humans. They believe in the power of words, in the possibility of understanding. Even in the midst of war, they look for paths to peace." Kira's voice was thoughtful. "But Commander, you told us earlier that humans are capable of terrible violence, of revenge and cruelty. How do you reconcile that with this story of peace?" "Because humans contain both," Vexlar said simply. "They are not one thing or another. They are complex, contradictory, and ever-changing. They can be warriors and peacemakers, sometimes in the same individual. They adapt to circumstances. When war is necessary, they fight with determination. When peace is possible, they pursue it with equal determination. They do not see these as contradictions. They see them as different tools for different situations." He looked around at the remaining soldiers. "That is what makes them such valuable allies. They understand that force is not always the answer. They understand that making peace can require as much courage as making war. They are willing to try both, to use whatever approach serves the greater good." An older officer spoke from the shadows. "Commander Vexlar, you have painted a complex picture of humanity tonight. They sound like beings of great capability and great contradiction. If you had to summarize them in a few words, what would you say?" Vexlar was quiet for a long moment, considering. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of experience and respect. "Humans are survivors. They come from a world that tried to kill them at every turn, where everything from the weather to the wildlife was a threat. They learned to overcome, to adapt, to never surrender. They brought that mindset to the stars. When they encountered other species, they could have become conquerors. Instead, they chose to become allies. That choice defines them." He stood slowly, his joints creaking with age and old injuries. They are dangerous, yes, but they are dangerous in the service of something greater than themselves. They fight for ideals, for principles, for each other. They believe that the universe can be made better through effort and sacrifice, and they prove it every day, in 1,000 small ways and occasional large ones. The commander looked at each young face in turn. You will serve alongside humans in the days to come. Remember what I have told you. Respect them, learn from them, but also teach them what you know. They are eager to learn, to understand alien perspectives. They know they do not have all the answers. That humility, combined with their determination, is what makes them remarkable. Rin stood and gave a formal salute. Thank you, Commander. These stories will stay with me. They will stay with all of us, Kira added, rising as well. The group began to disperse, soldiers heading off to their quarters or to other parts of the facility, but several stopped to shake Vexlar's hand or touch his shoulder in the Caltharian gesture of respect. He accepted their gratitude with quiet dignity. When the last soldier had left, the bartender approached Vexlar's table. Another drink, Commander? Vexlar shook his head. No, thank you. I have had enough tonight, both of drink and of memory. He placed payment on the table and stood to leave. Commander, the bartender said quietly. He was an old Caltharian, scarred and weathered. I served in the Zenith War too. I lost my clutch brother at Kepler Station. For a long time I hated humans for what happened there. But tonight, hearing you speak, I think I understand them better. Perhaps it is time to let go of old anger. Vexlar placed a hand on the bartender's shoulder. The past cannot be changed. We can only choose how to carry it forward. The humans I serve with now are not the same ones who fought at Kepler. Even those who were there have changed, learned, grown. We all have. That is what survival requires. The bartender nodded slowly. Thank you, Commander, for your service and for your words tonight. Vexlar left the cantina and walked through the quiet corridors of the military base. It was late, and most personnel were in their quarters. He passed a window that looked out onto the landing field. Several ships were docked there, including the human vessel that had arrived earlier that day. Its hull bore scars from combat, but it was well maintained, the paint fresh despite the dents and scoring. A figure stood by the window, silhouetted against the starlight. As Vexlar approached, he recognized the shape. Lieutenant Williams, you are up late. The human turned, a smile on his face. Couldn't sleep, Commander. Thought I'd check on the ship, make sure the repairs are holding. Old habits. He paused, studying Vexlar's face. You look tired. Been telling war stories again? The recruits wanted to hear about humans, Vexlar said. I obliged them. Williams chuckled. Let me guess, you told them we're crazy, dangerous, and unpredictable, but also loyal and determined? Something like that, Vexlar admitted. Was I wrong? Nah, Williams said. That's pretty accurate, though you might have mentioned we're also incredibly handsome and charming. He grinned to show he was joking. What did they think? They were impressed, and frightened, and curious. Vexlar looked out at the stars. Much as I was when I first encountered your species. Williams joined him at the window. You know, when I first signed up to serve in a joint unit, I was nervous too. We'd heard stories about the Caltharians, about how tough you were, how your honor code was unbreakable. I wasn't sure I could measure up to those standards. And now? Vexlar asked. Now I know that honor isn't about following rules perfectly. It's about trying to do right, even when it's hard. You taught me that, Commander. Williams looked at his commanding officer with genuine respect. You saved my life in that first mission. You didn't have to. It broke tactical protocol, but you did it because it was the right thing to do. That's when I understood that we weren't so different, your people and mine. Vexlar felt a warmth in his chest, an emotion his people did not have a precise word for. The humans called it camaraderie, or friendship, or brotherhood. Whatever the word, it was real. We are different in many ways, Williams, but in the ways that matter, perhaps we are the same. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars. After a while, Williams spoke again. The recruits, did they ask about the hard parts? About the times we failed or made mistakes? Some of them did, Vexlar said. I told them about the Kreth colony, about the admiral who chose revenge over mercy. Williams nodded slowly. Good. They need to know we're not perfect, that we struggle with the same moral questions as everyone else. He paused. Did you tell them what happened after? How our whole command structure was reformed to prevent it from happening again? I did, Vexlar confirmed. That is important too. Not just the mistakes, but how you respond to them. We try, Williams said simply. We don't always get it right, but we try. That's all anyone can do, really. Another comfortable silence fell between them. Finally, Williams straightened up. I should get some sleep. We ship out in 8 hours, and I have a feeling tomorrow's going to be interesting. Interesting how? Vexlar asked. Command is assigning us 2 new human recruits fresh from advanced training. I need to be alert to evaluate them, make sure they fit with the unit. Williams grinned. Plus, you know how new humans can be, full of energy and eager to prove themselves. They'll probably try to volunteer for every dangerous mission in the first week. Vexlar's mandibles spread in amusement. That does sound like humans. Very well, Lieutenant. Get your rest. I will see you in the morning. Good night, Commander, and thanks. Williams started to walk away, then turned back. For what it's worth, I'm glad you told those recruits about us. The more our peoples understand each other, the stronger the alliance becomes. We need that strength for what's coming. What is coming? Vexlar asked, though he suspected he knew. More wars, probably. The galaxy's a dangerous place, and there are always new threats emerging. But whatever comes, we'll face it together. Humans and Caltharians and all the other Alliance species. That's what matters. Williams gave a casual salute and walked off down the corridor. Vexlar remained at the window for a while longer, thinking about the stories he had told, the truths he had shared. The young recruits would carry those stories with them, use them to understand the humans they would serve alongside. Some might be frightened by what they had learned. Others would be inspired. All would be better prepared. He thought about his own journey, from enemy to ally to friend. The path had not been easy. There had been mistrust and misunderstanding, cultural clashes and communication failures. But through it all, the humans had been patient, willing to explain their ways and learn about others. They had earned his respect through actions, not words. Now, 6 years later, Vexlar could not imagine serving without humans in his unit. They brought a perspective and energy that enriched every operation. They challenged assumptions, proposed creative solutions, and never accepted defeat. They made everyone around them better simply by their presence. Tomorrow, 2 new human soldiers would join his unit. He would watch them carefully as he watched all new additions. He would test them, push them, make sure they were worthy of the uniform they wore. But he had no doubt they would rise to the challenge. That was the human way. Vexlar finally turned from the window and headed to his own quarters. As he walked, he passed other soldiers moving through the corridors, preparing for the next day. Some were human, some Caltharian, some from other Alliance species. They worked together seamlessly now, a truly integrated force. In his quarters, Vexlar removed his medals and set them carefully on his desk. Each one represented a battle, a campaign, a moment when he had proven himself worthy. But the one he was most proud of was the smallest, a simple bronze disc with the human and Caltharian flags intertwined. It had been given to him by the human government for his role in building the first joint military unit. The citation read, "For exceptional service in fostering cooperation between species and demonstrating that former enemies can become trusted allies." It was more than a medal. It was a promise kept, a bridge built, a future secured. He lay down to rest, his mind still processing the evening's conversations. The recruits would remember what he had told them. They would carry those stories forward, sharing them with others. The legend of human capability would grow, and with it, respect for Earth's warriors. But Vexlar knew the truth behind the legend. Humans were not mythical beings. They were flesh and blood, with all the weaknesses and strengths that implied. They could be hurt, could fail, could die. What made them special was not invulnerability, but determination. They kept going when others stopped. They found ways when others found excuses. They believed when others despaired. That belief, that fundamental human optimism, was perhaps their greatest weapon. It sustained them through impossible odds and gave them strength when strength should have failed. It made them dream of better tomorrows and work to make those dreams real. As Vexlar drifted towards sleep, his last thought was a simple one. He was grateful to call humans his allies. Whatever challenges the future held, he knew they would face them together, and together they would prevail. The next morning came quickly. Vexlar rose early, as was his habit, and prepared for the day. He reviewed reports, checked on ship repairs, and coordinated with other officers. At precisely 800 hours, he made his way to the landing bay where the new recruits were scheduled to arrive. Williams was already there, along with several other members of their unit. The ship carrying the new soldiers descended smoothly, touching down with practiced precision. The ramp extended, and two young humans emerged. They were young indeed, probably in their early 20s. One was male, tall and lean with dark hair. The other was female, shorter but clearly athletic, with brown skin and sharp eyes. Both wore crisp new uniforms and carried themselves with the careful confidence of recent graduates. Vexlar and Williams approached them. The two recruits snapped to attention, their salutes perfect. "Sergeant Davis reporting for duty, sir," the male said. "Corporal Johnson reporting for duty, sir," the female added. Williams returned their salutes with a relaxed casualness that came from experience. "At ease, both of you. Welcome to Joint Task Force 7. I'm Lieutenant Williams, and this is Commander Vexlar. He's Caltharian, in case you couldn't tell by the scales and extra eye." Both recruits relaxed slightly, though they still maintained military bearing. Davis spoke first. "It's an honor to serve in a joint unit, sir. We've heard great things about Task Force 7. "Don't believe everything you hear," Williams said with a grin. "About half of it is exaggeration. The other half doesn't capture how crazy things actually get." He nodded toward Vexlar. "But you're in good hands. The commander here has forgotten more about warfare than most people ever learn." Vexlar studied the two new humans carefully. They seemed competent, alert, eager, much like Williams had been 6 years ago. "Welcome to the unit," he said formally. "You will find that we do things differently here. We are not just humans working alongside Caltharians. We are one team, one unit. Your species matters less than your competence and your commitment to your fellow soldiers." "Understood, sir," Johnson said. "We're ready to prove ourselves." "You will have ample opportunity," Vexlar assured her. "We ship out in 6 hours for a patrol mission in the Outer Rim. It should be routine, but routine missions have a way of becoming complicated. Lieutenant Williams will brief you on procedures and protocols. Learn quickly. Your life and the lives of your team depend on it." "Yes, sir," both recruits responded in unison. As Williams led them away for their briefing, Vexlar watched them go. They walked with the unconscious swagger of youth, confident in their training and abilities. In a few weeks or months, they would learn humility. They would face situations that no training could fully prepare them for. They would be tested, pushed to their limits and beyond. But they would survive. They would adapt. They would become part of the team. Because that was what humans did. They overcame. They persevered. They found a way. An older Caltharian officer approached Vexlar. "New humans?" "Yes," Vexlar confirmed. "Fresh from training." "They look eager," the officer observed. "Perhaps too eager." They will learn, Vexlar said, as we all do, through experience in trial. But they have potential. I can see it. The officer nodded slowly. I heard you spoke to the recruits last night about humans and their capabilities. Word travels fast, Vexlar noted. It does when you tell stories in a crowded cantina, the officer said with amusement. Some of the soldiers who heard you have been talking about it. You have them both fascinated and frightened. Good, Vexlar said simply. Respect and caution are appropriate responses. Humans are our allies, but they are also dangerous. It is important to understand both truths. And what do you think the humans would say about us? The officer asked. If they told stories about Caltharians, what would they emphasize? Vexlar considered the question. They would speak of our honor, our commitment to our word, our physical strength, and our tactical discipline. They would note that we are slower to trust, but absolutely loyal once trust is earned. They would say that fighting alongside Caltharians means never having to worry about your flank, because we do not retreat and we do not abandon our allies. The officer looked pleased. That is a fair assessment. We have our own strengths as they have theirs. Exactly, Vexlar agreed. That is why the alliance works. We complement each other. Where we are rigid, they are flexible. Where they are impulsive, we are measured. Together, we are stronger than either species alone. I hope you are right, the officer said, because the threats we face are only growing. The dark sectors have become more active. Pirate attacks are increasing. There are rumors of a new hostile power rising in the unexplored regions. I know, Vexlar said grimly, which is why building strong joint units is more important than ever. We need to learn to fight together, to trust each other completely. The next war will not be like the last one. We will need every advantage we can muster. Then let us hope your young human recruits are as capable as you believe, the officer said. We will need them to be. As the officer walked away, Vexlar's thoughts turned to the future. The galaxy was vast and full of unknowns. New threats would emerge. New challenges would arise. But the Alliance would face them together, human and Caltharian, and all the other species who had chosen cooperation over isolation. In 6 hours, his ship would launch on what was supposed to be a routine patrol. But Vexlar had been a soldier too long to believe in routine. Something would happen. It always did. And when it did, he would rely on his training, his experience, and his team. His team that included humans like Williams, like Davis and Johnson, like all the others he had fought beside over the years. Humans who would never quit, never surrender, never accept defeat. Humans who would find a way or make one, who would overcome any obstacle through sheer determination and innovative thinking. Vexlar felt something that might have been anticipation or might have been dread. With humans on your side, you never knew what would happen next, but you knew it would be interesting. You knew that they would give everything they had, and you knew that they would never let you down. That was enough. That was everything. He turned and headed back to his quarters to prepare. In 6 hours, they would launch, and whatever waited for them in the outer rim, they would face it together. Human and Caltharian, allies, friends, brothers and sisters in arms. The future was uncertain, the threats were real, but with humans fighting beside him, Vexlar felt something he had not felt in years. He felt hope. And hope, he had learned from the humans, was the most powerful weapon of all. It sustained you when ammunition ran out. It kept you going when your body screamed for rest. It gave meaning to sacrifice and purpose to survival. The humans had taught him that, among many other things. As he packed his gear and prepared his weapons, Vexlar found himself looking forward to the mission ahead. Not because he sought danger or craved combat, but because he would be doing what he did best, serving alongside the finest warriors in the galaxy. Human warriors who had earned his respect, his trust, and his friendship through their actions and their character. Whatever the next 6 hours brought, Whatever challenges awaited them in the black between the stars, they would face it as they faced everything. Together, united, unbreakable. That was the promise of the alliance. That was the strength of cooperation. That was the power of choosing friendship over enmity, understanding over prejudice, unity over division. The humans understood this instinctively. They had built their civilization on these principles, fought wars to defend them, and carried them to the stars when they finally left their homeworld. Now they were teaching these lessons to the galaxy, one joint mission at a time, one friendship at a time, one shared victory at a time. And Vexillar, once their enemy and now their ally, was grateful to be part of that story. It was a privilege to serve beside humanity, a privilege earned through blood and sacrifice, through trust built in the crucible of combat, through the simple realization that despite all differences, all species wanted the same things: safety, peace, purpose, and connection. The humans gave all of that. In return, they asked only for respect, honesty, and the chance to prove themselves. It was a fair trade, more than fair. Vexillar finished his preparations and took one last look around his quarters. The medals on his desk caught the light, each one a memory, a moment frozen in time. But the bronze disc with the intertwined flags was the one that mattered most. It represented everything he had learned, everything he had become since that first confused encounter with humanity 6 years ago. He was a better soldier now, a better leader, a better being. The humans had made him so, simply by being who they were, by challenging him to question his assumptions, by showing him new ways of thinking and acting, by proving that former enemies could become trusted friends. The comm system chimed. "Commander Vexillar, this is Lieutenant Williams. Pre-flight check is complete. All systems green. We're ready for launch on your order." Vexillar activated his comm. "Understood, Lieutenant. Begin final preparations. I will be there shortly." "Yes, sir. By the way, the new recruits are settling in well. Davis has already bonded with half the crew, and Johnson impressed everyone by scoring higher on the gunnery simulator than anyone else this month." Vexillar's mandibles spread in amusement. "Of course they did. They are humans. I expected nothing less." Williams laughed over the comm. "True enough, Commander. See you at the ship." The connection closed. Vexillar took his medals and locked them in the secure compartment of his desk. He would not need them where he was going. All he needed was his weapons, his armor, his training, and his team. Especially his team, his family, his brothers and sisters who would stand beside him no matter what came, human and Caltharian alike, bound together by something stronger than orders or duty, bound by choice, by mutual respect, by shared experiences that had forged them into something new. Something better than either species alone. Something worth fighting for. Vexillar left his quarters and headed for the landing bay. His stride was confident, his mind clear. Whatever awaited them in the outer rim, they would handle it. Together. Always together. That was the human way, and now it was his way too. The galaxy stretched before them, vast and full of wonder and danger. But they would explore it as partners, defend it as allies, and shape its future as friends. That was the promise of the Alliance. That was the gift humanity had given to the stars. And Vexillar, warrior of the Caltharian forces, veteran of countless battles, commander of Joint Task Force 7, was honored to be part of it all. The future was uncertain, but with humans fighting beside him, he knew one thing for certain: it would never be boring, and it would always be worth fighting for. He reached the landing bay and saw his team assembled, ready for departure. Williams stood at the base of the ship's ramp, checking something on his datapad. Davis and Johnson were loading supplies, working efficiently despite their newness to the unit. Other team members, human and Caltharian, moved through their pre-flight routines with practiced coordination. This was his family. This was his purpose. This was why he served. Not for medals or glory, but for these beings who depended on him and whom he depended on in return. The bond between soldiers transcended species, transcended culture, transcended everything except shared experience and mutual trust. The humans had taught him that too. Vexlar boarded the ship, ready for whatever came next. Behind him, his team followed, and above them, the stars waited. Full of promise, full of danger, full of opportunity. The future stretched ahead, unknown but not frightening, because they would face it together. And together, they were unstoppable. That was the lesson. That was the truth. That was the answer to every question and the solution to every problem. Together. Always together. It was the human way, and now it was the galaxy's way too. Thanks to the warriors who refused to accept limits, who defied impossible odds, who proved through action that cooperation was stronger than conflict, that friendship was more powerful than enmity, that unity could overcome any challenge. Humanity had given the galaxy a gift, the example of what was possible when beings chose to work together instead of fighting apart. It was a gift beyond price. And every day, in units like Task Force 7, across dozens of worlds in hundreds of ships, that gift was being honored through service and sacrifice. Vexlar settled into his command chair and began the launch sequence. Around him, his crew worked with seamless efficiency. Human voices mixed with Caltharian, speaking in the shared military language that had evolved to accommodate both species. "All stations report ready, Commander," William said from his position at the tactical console. "Very good," Vexlar replied. "Begin launch sequence. Let us see what the outer rim has in store for us today." The ship's engines hummed to life, lifting them smoothly from the landing pad. Through the viewport, Vexlar watched the military base fall away below them, growing smaller as they climbed into the sky. Then they were through the atmosphere, entering the black of space, and the stars surrounded them in all their glory. Somewhere out there, adventure waited, danger waited, purpose waited, and whatever they found, Vexlar knew his team would handle it, because they were the best, because they had trained for this, because they believed in each other and in the mission, because they were humans and Caltharians fighting side by side, proving every day that the alliance was more than just words on a treaty. It was real, it was tested, it was true, and it would endure through whatever storms the galaxy might send their way. That was the promise, that was the reality, that was the future they were building, one mission at a time. And Vexlar was proud to be part of it, proud to serve, proud to fight, proud to stand alongside the most.